Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Rundown, where we talk about 2A news and conservative views. I will be your host today, Craig DeLuz, coming at you from the West Coast, the left coast, behind the Iron Curtain, otherwise known as the Sierras. Coming at you on this fine, what day would that be? Oh, that's right, Taco Tuesday.
It's raining tacos from out of the sky. Tacos, no need to ask why. Just open your mouth and close your eyes. It's raining tacos.
It's raining tacos out in the street. Tacos, all you can eat. Lettuce and shells, cheese and meat. It's raining tacos. Yum, 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 yummity yum. It's like a treat.
I know exactly what you're thinking. You're thinking, why are they celebrating tacos? Well, those of you who are new to the program are probably wondering that, but I'll just tell you, we celebrate tacos because we believe it to be the quintessential American food. Because quite frankly, American tacos are not the same as, say, tacos in the country of origin. But it's been a food that originated in another country, but we have made uniquely American. And and plus, Mike and I love tacos, so there you be. That there be how it be. And oh, by the way, unfortunately, once again, as you can tell, Mike was unable to be here today. But hey, I'm here, you're here, we're here, and we are going to have a good time. But before we do, we're going to start off by, giving a quick shout out to our sponsors. We'll start here with Hitman Industries. Hitmanindustries.net is where you will find them. All you got to do is go there. If you're looking to do a rebuild on your rifle, if you're looking for barrels, rifle length, pistol length barrels, they're the place to go. All right. If you bought an AR in the last 5 years or so, chances are you already have one of their barrels. But hey, why not get another one? Why not do a rebuild? Or why not just, build a new one? Why not? Whatever you're going to do, you can find exactly what you need right there at hitmanindustries.net. Then there's the California Republican Assembly, helping to elect conservatives from races from school board all the way up to President of the United States. Ronald Reagan referred to them as the conscience of the Republican Party. Become a part of California's future today at cragop.org. And then we have Hog holsters. If you're looking for a concealed carry holster, if you're looking for a tactical holster, get the best there is at Hog holsters. All you got to do is go to hogholsters.com, use the discount code The Rundown, all caps, no spaces. Get your Hog holster today. And finally, if you're looking for hunting gear, outdoor gear, tactical gear, whatever it might be, you can find it at uscombatgear.com. Veteran owned and operated. They offer quality products with integrity, great prices, and fast shipping. Once again, that's uscombatgear.com. All right, now we're going to go ahead and get into today's topics. And this first one, I got to be honest with you, is more based on an opinion. And I say, the reason why I wanted to report this one today, I wanted to talk about this one today, was because this is an opinion that is largely being pushed, or at least a narrative that is being pushed in the mainstream media. You know that last week there was a protest in Nashville following a shooting that took place. In the Tennessee legislature, there were a number of members who were engaged in an insurrection there in the well of the Tennessee legislature. And I say insurrection because that's, according to their definition, that's what this pretty much was. Or when I say there, I mean the Democrats. You had members of the legislature who basically interrupted the business of the House with bullhorns, yelling and screaming there in the middle of their legislative session. And basically what happened is because of their actions, 2 of the 3 got removed. And the interesting thing is the 2 of the 3 that wound up getting removed happened to be the 2 black members. Now, that is now leading to this narrative. And once again, this is an opinion by a guy named Francis Wilkinson. I do not know Francis, but I'm going to guess that he is a racist, left-wing liberal. But anyway, so he talks about how in Tennessee, in their Tennessee politics and their gun policies, they're basically saying they seem to be warped by racism. And I once again, I find it to be interesting, but I will say this. I agree with him in that most gun policies are, in fact, warped by racism, except probably not the policies that they're referring to. Now, before we get into my explanation of that, they're talking about the fact that, first of all, only 2 black legislators got removed. Now, they're completely and utterly ignoring the fact that there was a difference in the behaviors of the legislators. In other words, the 2 black legislators were actually involved and engaged in the yelling and the screaming on the bullhorns, whereas the one white lady, by the way, she made a point in her defense that she was not engaged in the disruption in the House, and that she was either she said she was merely holding a sign or she wasn't holding a sign. But even she acknowledged in her defense of herself that her actions were were different, and thus she should not be held to the same standard. Now, mind you, she turned around and got voted when they voted to expel her. She made it by 1 vote. So evidently, it was the argument that she made regarding her behavior, the difference in her behavior, not her skin color, not her gender, but in her behavior, that actually wound up keeping her from getting expelled. But that didn't stop her from then, right afterwards, claiming that it was racism. That it was racism as the reason why. So my question is that if it was racism, then was it racist for her to distinguish the difference in her behavior? It must have been. It clearly must have been. She voted not to have herself expelled. So if she voted not to have herself expelled, she too must be a racist. But I digress, because we all know that, liberals do tend to be racist. I mean, look at places like San Francisco, or the state of California, which is admitting their blatant racism, right? Because that's why they're seeking to hand out reparations, because they have been blatantly racist. And I've always told you Democrats and liberals are racist, or at least the politicians, the power brokers within the Democratic Party. They are racist. And now they're just flat out admitting it. But the thing that I wanted to talk about when it comes to gun policies is the history of gun control. And that's the thing that they'll never acknowledge. In this piece right here, Mr. Wilkinson here, once again over at Bloomberg, he basically talks about how, during the Trump campaign, he talked about how the murder rate was at an all-time high, and it wasn't at an all-time high, but the murder rate was slightly on its way up at that point. It was the beginning of an increase in violent crime. Violent crime was up. Not by leaps and bounds, but after 20 years in a row of 20 plus years of going down every year, it had started to go up once again because of, in places like California, in places like Chicago, like Illinois, in places like Michigan, in places like, that were controlled largely by Democrats, where they started to decriminalize crime. You started to see crime going up, and that included violent crime. And in some cases, it included murder. Now, mind you, he talks about how that was about making white people fearful of black people. And there was one mistake, and there was one thing that Donald Trump had quoted during his campaign, where he talked about 81% of white murder victims were murdered by black people, and that wasn't true. It wasn't. But what wound up happening was that it flat out ignored, because, as we've talked about on this, people tend to murder their own. The majority of whites who are murdered by whites. The majority of blacks who are murdered by blacks. The majority of Latinos who are murdered by Latinos, right? But what's interesting is in this piece, Mr. Wilkinson goes on to talk about how, the murder rates, in particular, gun homicides and gun victims, are disproportionately people of color. Well, what he also ignores is and how these numbers are harming, ignoring those numbers and not passing gun control policies are in fact harming black people. Therefore, these gun policies are racist. Well, what he ignores is the fact that these numbers had been going down all across the country until the soft on crime or the smart on crime policies of the Democrats started being put in place. Once we started releasing criminals from jail under the guise that, well, people of color are disproportionately locked up in prison, we started letting criminals out, or we started letting people who were potentially violent felons out. And then we started seeing the crime rate go up. And then as we were not prosecuting those crimes, we started to see violent crime rates go up. And here's the thing. Guess who the overwhelming majority of those victims are? And he acknowledges it himself. People of color. So it's actually the Democrat policies, the liberal policies, the ones that where they say, well, basically what they're doing, and what they're saying is they're trying to help people who are locked up in jail. Well, here's what they're doing, folks. They are choosing criminals of color to support them at the expense of crime victims of color. So who are the actual racists? Where is racism? I mean, let's talk about gun policies. Let's talk about the fact that the original gun control policies were put in place as a part of the black codes, as a part of Jim Crow, in order to keep freed slaves from being able to own or possess firearms. Let's talk about the fact that in places like California, the first gun control laws were put in place to keep Native Americans, at that time they called them Indians, from being able to purchase firearms or ammunition. It was followed up in the early 1900s, the 1920s, where they decided to say, well, we're going to make it so that Chinese and Mexicans cannot purchase firearms or ammunition, right? Then they also handed it over to local law enforcement or sheriffs to have the discretion to determine who could get a concealed carry permit and who couldn't, as a way in which to lock people of color from being able to get concealed carry permits. Or we could talk about in the 1960s where they basically passed gun control. They ended open carry of a loaded firearm, largely to keep the Black Panthers from being able to, in their eyes, defend their neighborhoods, and largely to disarm Black Panthers. That's the racist face of gun control. When you look at where most firearm laws are being implemented or are coming victim, well, a lot of it's happening to people of color. So once again, I will just say, yes, I would agree with Mr. Wilkinson, not for the same reason, but yeah, no, gun control laws are tinged by racism. They are. Because largely what they're saying is, and by the way, when you start to look at some of these laws that they're passing to make it very, very expensive for you to be able to get a concealed carry permit, even though you have a fundamental right, the Supreme Court's made it clear through Bruen that you have a right to bear arms. The reason why they want to make it expensive is so that low-income people, or those people, you know who those people are in their eyes, cannot exercise their right to keep and bear arms. Anyway, that's what's going on there with that. Mr. Wilkinson, yes, you are a racist, and you promote racist policies by keeping people of color from being able to defend themselves. Anyway, that's just my perspective. I could be wrong. Okay, maybe it's not quote unquote racism, but I guess what I'm trying to show here is that by throwing racism in anything, they automatically then they believe that they now have the moral high ground. You want to argue and debate the policies? Let's argue and debate the policies. If you want to do it along racial lines, guess what? I can make that argument too. The fact is that he's not, I don't know, dude. I don't know if he's a racist or not, but here's what I do know. I do know he's a statist. I do know that he is an authoritarian. I do know that he wants to make sure that only the people that he deems worthy are able to defend themselves. And in order to implement his policies, because by the way, he wants the state to control people, including people of color. He wants the state to tell people what you can eat, what you can't. He wants the state to raise your children. He wants the state to be able to decide how your money is spent, right? In his case, he wants the state to control all of those things. And by declaring quote unquote racism, he doesn't have to actually argue the merit of his policies. And some of y'all will fall for it. At least, well, most of you watching this show will not fall for it, but some of you will. All right, next up we have a poll. And by the way, this is the reason why most people are interested in being able to exercise their fundamental right to keep and bear arms. This is a poll information you'll find at AmmoLand. It's a Rasmussen poll that basically says most people believe that violent crime is getting worse, right? And which is, by the way, is why gun sales continue to grow or continue to increase. Now, the interesting thing about it is that further down in the article, you're going to read here. So 60% of people who were polled in this Rasmussen poll believe that that violent crime is on the rise. Now, crime itself as a whole is actually up, but year over year, it's actually down. All right, to be honest, year over year, violent crime is actually down. But the perception is that it's continuing to go up, and that's largely because crime is continuing to go up, right? Crime as a whole is continuing to increase. And by the way, it's continuing to increase in spite of the fact that many people are basically not even reporting crimes. Because here's what happens. Someone comes and they steal from you. You report it. The police come out, they arrest the person, and then they take them to jail, and then the district attorney lets them out. Or the judge lets him out. Well, if the judge lets him out, then the district attorney is going to bother not taking it to court. And if the district attorney not bothering to take it to court, then the police are going to not bother arresting. And if they're not going to bother arresting the individuals, then people are going to stop calling and reporting the crimes, right? And if people stop bothering to report the crimes, then guess what? Crime numbers go down. Now, I think for violent crime, people are still going to largely report that, or at least for murders. But what you're seeing here is that in many cases, the reason why crime statistics aren't even worse than they are is because, well, law enforcement or the system has decided we're just not going to do it. You have these George Soros district attorneys who've decided, yeah, we're going to get smart on crime. You have California, our governor, Gavin Newsom, has shut down 3 prisons, is about to shut down a 4th, and it's estimated he may be shutting down up to 2 or 3 more. Where are all these criminals going? They're not being rehabilitated. No, they're being released on our streets. There's a reason why you are seeing, for example, in San Francisco, it's dying on the vine. And that's because people aren't reopening their stores. Downtown Sacramento, where I live, once again, there was an event that took place, a shooting that took place a year ago. They were just honoring it, and they were just commemorating it. One of the things that they were lamenting about was that there were so many vacant downtown buildings, downtown businesses. Well, folks, if you keep making it so that it is either too expensive or making it too expensive to be able to own a business. And by the way, part of making it too expensive is not prosecuting people when they steal from you, when they steal. Or when people riot and destroy the business, insurance companies decide, yeah, we're either not going to reinsure or we're going to jack up the rates, meaning the person can't do business anymore. There's a reason why employers are fleeing California. And in part, it's because of crime. I'm not saying solely. Taxation, big reason. Overregulation, big reason. And by the way, the fact that it's just too darn expensive. Why? Well, crime. Crime, taxation, and overregulation. In any case, folks, I guess what I'm trying to share with you here is that the thing of this thing is there's a reason why people are buying firearms. And it's because they recognize what Bruen acknowledges. They have a fundamental right to be able to defend themselves. And they want to be able to defend themselves. And they want to be able to utilize the firearms that they want to be able to defend themselves. And the government, unfortunately, sadly, unfortunately, the government in many cases is not interested in allowing people to be able to exercise that fundamental human right or that constitutionally enumerated right. But people are going to do it. If people don't feel safe and they don't feel that law enforcement can protect them, because, by the way, one of the other things that many of these legislators are doing, many of these cities are doing, municipalities, is they are making it more difficult for law enforcement to be able to do their jobs. So as long as you continue to do that, folks, people are going to continue to decide to do their own thing. or at least to put themselves in a position where they can defend themselves. All right. Moving right along, FBI surveillance of Catholics. Now, this was something this is something that you can get. I've heard in some of the hearings. Some of the hearings have been taking place. If you've been watching the weaponization committees, this is an interesting one. So, what they're saying is that the FBI had actually hatched a plan in order to surveil Catholics. And what they're really looking for are quote unquote radical Catholics, those who are quote unquote radically pro-life. Now, in any movement, I will acknowledge that there are extremists. There are people who believe in exercising violence in order to get their political point across. That's not most people in the pro-life movement. That's not even it's a small, there are a small percentage of people. But having said that, what they wanted to do was go out of their way to infiltrate Catholic churches and basically spy on them, right? Here, let me read this for you. It says, Republicans began investigating the matter after the January release of an FBI memo that detailed the Bureau's efforts to infiltrate a group of Catholic parishes in Richmond, Virginia area. The FBI last month produced a limited number of records as a part of the probe, one of which discussed opportunities for FBI to leverage existing sources or develop new ones who could report on suspicious activity within their parishes. Jordan asserted that the documents show the FBI sought to enlist Catholic houses of worship as potential sources to monitor and report on their parishioners. Americans attend church to worship and congregate for their spiritual and personal betterment. They must be free to exercise their fundamental First Amendment rights without worrying that the FBI may have planted so-called tripwire sources or other informants in their houses of worship, the Republican wrote. Now, what I'm going to say is this. I think if an organization, and in this case, the Catholic Church in this case does not qualify as one of these organizations I'm about to describe. If an organization is clearly demonstrated calls of violence or things like that, yeah, they need to be investigated. But simply because they happen to be Catholic, I think or simply they happen to be of a particular faith, I think is clearly a violation of the First Amendment. I think you need to be very, very careful whenever you start talking about investigating, and particularly covertly, places of worship. I think that you have to be very, very careful that you are not violating one's religious freedoms. You are not prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And by the way, they happen to believe in many cases in some of these organizations that if you happen to believe that abortion is murder, then that makes you a potential radical extremist. That's the way many on the left view people who believe that abortion is murder. And I find that to be outrageous because, I think about, okay, what do we call the intentional taking of an innocent life? Yeah, we call that murder. I don't know what else to call it. They call it abortion, I guess. But the rest of us, or at least most common people, refer to it as murder. So, it's as if you stop to realize that if a person, and even I always use this exercise, and I always say, if you are, for example, if you're pro-life and you are imagining someone, you're trying to get how someone thinks who is pro-choice. If they believe that life does not begin until birth, then before birth, it's not really a life. So the only real rights to be protected there are those of the person whose body it is. So you understand to a certain degree why they believe it's controlling someone's body or why that individual's rights need to be protected. Now, let's conversely think of that. Let's say I'm talking to someone who's pro-choice or pro-abortion. And I say, consider that if someone who is pro-life, consider what if you believed that it was a life from conception? then by definition, because that individual has done nothing to deserve to have their life taken, by all definitions, they're an innocent life, or they're an innocent individual. What do we call in this country the intentional taking of an innocent life? We call it murder. That's what we do. We call it murder. So naturally, people are going to be very passionate about protecting that innocent life. Now, once again, I'm not sitting here saying that that means that you ought to go to violent extremes. But understand that mentality. You need to understand that's their argument. That's where they're coming from. But that's not the way the government sees it. The way those in some of our law enforcement apparatuses see it is that if you happen to believe that abortion is murder or is tantamount to murder, then you are a radical extremist and need to be at the very least surveilled, if not apprehended. So that's the world we live in these days, folks. Let's see. Next story. What was Bud Light thinking? All right, you guys I know you've been following the whole story going on with Bud Light and Dylan Mulvaney and them deciding that they needed to seek out, basically them including and creating or bringing in Devin Mulvaney, a transgendered woman, a man who is transitioning or transitioned, I don't know, to a woman, to be a spokesperson for their product. I don't know what they were thinking. Well, you know what? I don't even need to tell you what they were thinking. We actually have the marketing person here who will tell you exactly what they were thinking. This is what she had to say.
I'm a businesswoman. I had a really clear job to do when I took over Bud Light. And it was, this brand is in decline. It's been in decline for a really long time. And if we do not attract young drinkers to come and drink this brand, there will be no future for Bud Light. So I had this super clear mandate. It's like, we need to evolve and elevate this incredibly iconic brand. And what I brought to that was a belief in, okay, what does evolve and elevate mean? It means inclusivity. It means shifting the tone. It means having a campaign that's truly inclusive and feels light, brighter and different and appeals to women and to men. And representation is at sort of the heart of evolution. You've got to see people who reflect you in the work. And we had this hangover. I mean, Bud Light had been kind of a brand of bratty, kind of out of touch humor, and it was really important that we had another approach.
All right, so their other approach was to seek out and include an individual who okay, first of all, and I've heard this before, Dylan Mulvaney is a professional attention seeker. Dylan Mulvaney, Dylan Mulvaney is a professional. I will just put it to you this way. If you thought that you were going to attract people to drink Bud Light by going to a person who was like, and I will just say this. Oh God. If you thought this was the way to do it, I'm sorry, you are sorely wrong. Now, I am all for, you're a grown adult, you want to live your life however you choose to live your life, then you live your life that way. That is fine. But you also have to kind of consider your audience. And when I think of the Bud Light drinking community, I got to tell you, I don't see how having someone who's like talking about normalizing, the female bulge, that some women have bulges, and I will leave that at, I won't get into any detail. If you think that is how you are going to grow your brand, wow. If that's what you think is going to get young people to drink, if you think that is what is going to get people, young people to be attracted to your brand, you are really out of touch with who your audience is and who drinks your brand. You really are. Or who knows? Maybe I'm the one that's out of touch. But all I know is that right now there are distributors of Bud Light all across the country who are having a hard time getting rid of Bud Light. I just think that, pushing a social agenda, and that's really what this is about. It's about pushing a social and cultural agenda cultural agendas happen because people believe cultures in the nation change because the people believe it's going to change. It doesn't just happen because you start pushing it. Anyway, I think right now Budweiser is starting to see the failure of their decision. It's sad because Budweiser's been an iconic brand in this country for decades. And I don't know that it's ever going to fully disappear. But at the very least, it is going to see its value decrease significantly over the next few months, if not years. All right, moving on to what we have next. We are now at our parting shots. That's right, parting shots brought to you by Hog Holsters. Get your Hog Holster today by going to hogholster.com and using the discount code The Rundown, all caps, no spaces. Get your Hog Holster today. All right, our first, let's see here. Bam. Our first, this is in honor of the prosecution of Donald Trump, which is currently taking place. What you have here is a Democrat flushing the toilet, and you have Lady Justice, or the justice system, that's being flushed down the toilet. And you have the Democrats saying, yes, I hate Trump that much. Okay, and then this next one, here you've got, it says, welcome to California. It says, caution, illegal crossing, because, in California, we welcome those who have entered our country illegally against our immigration laws. As well as it also says, caution, residents and businesses fleeing, because guess what? Yes, they are in fact fleeing the state of California, and we have no one else to thank except our good governor, Mr. Gavin Newsom. And then moving right along, I guess that's the end of the show, huh? Wow. God, that happened fast. All right. Well, before we go, let's make sure to give a quick shout out to our sponsors. We got Hitman Industries. Visit them at hitmanindustries.net. Rifle and pistol length barrels available to you today. The California Republican Assembly, the conscience of the Republican Party. Check them out at cragop.org. And you got Hog Holsters. Find them at hogholsters.com. You just use the discount code The Rundown, all caps, no spaces. Get your Hog Holster today. And then finally, if you're looking for tactical gear, outdoor gear, fun gear, go to uscombatgear.com. And with that, we're going to call it a day. We very much appreciate you tuning in. We appreciate you liking and sharing the program and encouraging your friends to do the same. We'll be back tomorrow on Hump Day. Until then, y'all take care.